Welcome to It Doesn't Take a Genius.
Good day to you, It Doesn't Take a Genius listeners and viewers, both of you. I want to do yet another follow-up of this theme we've had here lately, talking about engagement. We talked about your engagement and how you getting to know your people improves how you go into work. We've talked about things you could do to help other people with their engagement in the last episode. And I want to give you one more tool for that. And it is such a basic tool that we often skip over it. And the tool is stories. Stories. Stories are sticky. I am recording this episode on my phone because Apple is having some problems and doesn't seem to be able to record video that I can import into iMovie, which is where I do the editing. Well, it got me frustrated, and it also got me thinking about all the things about Apple that I know. I know the stories of how Steve Jobs set up sort of a maverick operation where they literally hoisted a pirate flag when they were building the Macintosh computer inside Apple. I know about how he toured Xerox PARC and got a chance to see, I think he saw the mouse, object-oriented programming, and graphical user interfaces, Windows. And that was the start of the genius that was to come. I know about how he carried Steve Wozniak's computer over to the Macintosh building, just sort of forcing him to come join his team, and the two of them, go on to great things. All of those are stories that I could give you details of, even though it's been probably years since I've heard them, decades in some cases since I've heard them. Stories are sticky. And so I think it is an underused tool for our workplaces, for employee engagement and onboarding, frankly. So here's what I mean by that. Employees do, of course, have to learn what I'll call the grammar of your workplace, right? They have to learn terms for your industry, terms that are specific to your company. They have to learn the processes to follow, the policies, and so on. How to log onto a computer, right? They have to learn all those things. But they must also learn the values of the organization and what makes the organization's work important and impactful, like we talked about in the last episode. So the best way to do all of that is through stories. And I was given the example, just as I was thinking about this, of Plato. Plato, in his famous work, The Republic, he spends a good portion of The Republic, sort of laying out what are the educational needs of this fictitious community he's setting up. And I've got a quote here for you. He suggests gymnastics for the body and music for the soul. Gymnastics for the body and music for the soul. That would be the educational portion of how they set up their community. So that was my understanding is that was a pretty typical thing in ancient Greek times, and I think Roman times. Ancient gym work, it really predates any of the modern research that we have on habits and how exercise influences the brain. You may have heard of the book The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. He sort of popularized the idea that there were these, what he called keystone habits, like exercise, that develop discipline, self-control, not just in physical fitness, but in mental areas as well. So, in other words, as you get into a habit of exercise, you start to see your effort pay off, right? You feel better, you have more energy, maybe you're getting stronger, or maybe you're getting slimmer, whatever it is. And so you recognize that decisions you make now have long-term gain. So that makes sense. Gymnastics makes sense as something that even a kid needs to have. And there are other reasons too, right? That they're developing the ability to understand the coordination between their mind and their body and so on and so forth. But But it makes sense that we're developing the ability to make habits for the long term. That makes perfect sense. How about music? Gymnastics and music. What do we mean by music? Well, it's important to know that music comes from the Greek term, the muse. There were the muses. They were sort of these minor goddesses. I think there were 7 of them, 7 or 9. These minor goddesses responsible for inspiring all art. Each of them were sort of in charge of inspiring a certain kind of art. And that makes a lot of sense from the Greek perspective, because the Greeks would have had kids memorize art, such as epics like the Iliad and the Odyssey. These are long book-length poems, and they were supposed to absorb a lot of that art, and especially the story. And Plato argues that the stories should be surgically intentional, shall we say, to help form virtuous character. Only the right kinds of stories will do, right? Augustine had similar thoughts. He said, some of these mythologies that we tell really have awful morals. Some have better morals. We should focus on those. So why go to such lengths? Why have kids memorize these stories? We've got a colleague that we've talked about before on the podcast, John Kusava, and John points out that stories are storage. So when you think stories, think storage. They are our cultural memory. They illustrate our values, what we're about, what we believe. Stories show the connection between our beliefs and our behaviors, right? We see what it looks like to live out our culture, to live out our values, our beliefs. And if we're being honest, the reality is that stories are sticky. They are a lot more likely to capture our imagination and be something that we remember, right? They catch our attention, and I would say that's a lot more inspirational than, some inspirational poster on the wall that has a bunch of men, rowing in the same direction, and it says teamwork in big letters at the bottom. That not so memorable, not so inspiring. But stories are, especially true stories. There's a classical education writer and philosopher that I really enjoy, Martin Cawthron, and he says, in the order of learning, stories come first. In the order of learning, stories come first. And think about it, even Plato's Republic, it is set up as a story. The whole philosophical work is about a dinner party. It's about a dinner party where Socrates and some dudes are sitting around talking about what exactly is justice, what exactly is virtue, morality. And they spin up this story within the story about this fictitious republic that they could create. And those principles, just so we're clear, have lasted 2.5 millennia at this point. It's stuck, right? The story stuck. It sticks around. So mighty is the sticking power of a good story that it lasts 2.5 millennia, or to bring it back to the workplace, it's something that people are going to remember a lot more than any statistics or process that you share right off the get-go. They'll have to develop some muscle memory on some of this stuff to learn your processes, but the stories will stick. In fact, they stick better than anything else I do with people, and I know Mike would say the same thing. We tell a story, somebody will repeat that story back to us a year later. We share a statistic about, the percentage of meaning that's communicated by body language versus tone of voice versus your words. I never can remember what the percentage is myself, and I teach this stuff. I know that words are the vast minority compared to the other two, and I think, frankly, the research has been done a few times and the numbers change. But if I tell a story about how somebody communicated meaning by using good tone of voice and good body language, people remember that. So, so here's the question: what are the stories of your organization, right? And if you are listening to this podcast, thinking about personal improvement, what are the stories of your own journey, right? And I'm not just talking about the origin story, right? I'm talking about the things that happened that were big challenges that you overcame, or big failures that you had to reckon with. I'm talking about perhaps stories that seem a little simpler, like someone who shows up to work every day and just does a great job, and it turns out that it's because they had this habit in the background. There was this thing that they did, something that made them a little different. So even if you are thinking right now, as I'm asking the question, what are your stories? And even if you are doing this as an individual, I would encourage you to bring in other stakeholders into this conversation. And I think I've done in a previous podcast, I'll try to link to it, that the questions that we ask around identifying your values would be really valuable here. Talking about, what are things people always say, you guys always do that. What are those things that there's a story behind them? So, who are the heroes and villains, right? That's part of stories. Who's admired? What are the behaviors that are subtly discouraged in your organization? What are the turning points? What are the failures? What stories are you naturally telling as part of your onboarding when you onboard an employee? And maybe more importantly, what are the stories that other coworkers, other employees are telling informally in the organization? Those are some thought starters on some things that might illustrate what you are about. And I would encourage you to capture as many of those stories as possible. Get them in a form to where you can tell them sort of in beats. Here's the situation, the obstacle, the challenge we were up against. Here's what we did, and here were the results. Beginning, middle, and end. Be able to tell these stories and start including them in your onboarding, your marketing, in your elevator pitches, in your sales pitches, and introducing your company to new clients. There are all sorts of different ways that you can use these stories, and I promise you they'll be much stickier than the kinds of things that we typically do with statistics. So that's the idea. I'll let the ukulele play us out and let you listen to the dulcet tones of John Wolfe as he talks about it doesn't take a genius. Like, subscribe, etc., guys. See you next week.
And that's a wrap. The musings of Mark and Mike. No rights reserved, etc. Feel free to share and discuss what you heard today. Even claim the ideas as your own. Who'd want to do that? See you next time on It Doesn't Take a Genius.
That's good enough.